Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Enrique Pepin, District 5 City Councilor, and I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology. Today is April 24, 2024. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/citycounciltv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Files Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.csit@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing. Individuals will be called on in the order in which they have signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. If you're interested in testifying in person, please add your name to the sign-up sheet near the entrance at the chamber. If you are looking to testify virtually, please email our Central Staff Liaison, Shane Pack, at shane.pack@boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on docket number 0513, order for a hearing to discuss the services the Boston Public Library offers our communities. This matter was sponsored by Councilor Erin Murphy and was referred to the committee on March 13, 2024. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues in order of arrival, Councilor Erin Murphy, Councilor Ed Flynn, and Councilor John Fitzgerald. And Councilor Mejia. I would like now to pass it over to the lead sponsor of this hearing order, Councilor Erin Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here. I often say, if you're lucky enough, if you're fortunate to say that you grew up in a library, right, that's something that I hope all of our children in the city of Boston can say. So it's important to me. I grew up in the Adams Street Library back when, I remember when Miss Breen assigned an assignment and you'd have to run to the library because it was way before the internet, and you'd try to take out a book and share it with your friends, and just wonderful memories. And also in the 80s, my family and my neighbors rallying on Adams Street to save the library, right? We've gone through cuts, and there's been times in city budgets where libraries sometimes seem to be the first thing we should take away, when I know everyone in this room probably agrees, and at the end of this hearing, I hope we agree more that we have to make sure that we're keeping our libraries safe and secure for generations to come. Just a few facts and reasons why I think it's important that, this deserves its own hearing here today. They're a great equalizer in society. They provide access to information and resources regardless of an individual's socioeconomic background, race, ethnicity, or gender. It promotes social equity and helps to bridge the digital divide, something you saw way before COVID, but through COVID and when your libraries did open and coming out of COVID, making sure that, people have the digital equity, which is something we have a lot of hearings here in the council about. It's also important that we preserve, the history and all of the old collections and books and the culture of our city, and, information that people have access to. It's also, I believe, important that it's intergenerational. My 84-year-old aunt walks every day down to the library to return her books. I know that children do their homework there. There's family programming. A few weeks ago, I was looking through your website of all the different resources you offer at the different branches during April vacation, and some of them I was like, I want to go myself. There were some wonderful opportunities. I think an important conversation today too, though, and it reminds me, of our community centers, that each branch has its own, culture and its own feeling and its own, different things they offer, which is great, but at the same time, making sure that the burden isn't on the friends of the libraries, or that we're making sure that there's support and programming coming from us in the city, so that certain branches aren't leaning on or depending on an outside source to make sure that those resources are there for them. And one last thing is, It reminds me also of the school system. It's a little bit of a mystery of who's in charge when we think of like the school committee, and when people call us about resources and times at the library and, you know, different questions about our libraries. It's like, do we call the Board of Trustees? Do we call you, David? Like, do you call your branch librarian? I know a lot of the children librarians, because, you know, they're usually the ones where parents come with the kids, get a lot of questions asked of them. So I'm hoping too, coming out of this, that we have a better understanding of, you know, where do we turn when there's a question about the libraries? And as you know, the libraries serve, you know, for many as a warm space, right? And many times people, you know, find refuge in the libraries, which is something that is just a fact, right? So we have to also make sure that we're finding that balance between people who need that space, but then making sure that those who are accessing the library for different reasons feel safe and welcome too. So hoping that that comes out of this conversation today also. So thank you for being here and looking forward to my colleagues' questions today too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. I'll also allow my other colleagues to give a brief opening remarks. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for chairing this important meeting. Also to Councilor Murphy, thank you for calling for this meeting. I want to recognize the dedicated and professional public library team that is here. I also want to highlight the incredible role that public libraries play in our communities. I'm fortunate. I wanted to have several of them in District 2. And I know how important they are, especially to young families, to residents, to seniors. We have a temporary library in Chinatown, and I love seeing the elderly people reading newspapers in Chinese. And I have the opportunity to sit there and talk with them. But it's also bringing people together. And that's what I love about the library. It's breaking down barriers and breaking down, you know, obstacles in our way and building bridges. That's what a library does. It welcomes everybody. It welcomes all kinds of people from various backgrounds. So, again, I'm proud of the public library in South Boston. My parents go up there probably 2 or 3 times a week. They love walking up there. I'm proud of the Chinatown Library as well. It's temporary, but I know we're getting a permanent library. I'm excited about that. And the South End Library that has been unfortunately shut down from several years due to flooding relating issues. But what I love about that library, it's directly across the street from Villa Victoria. And I love seeing young families, and many of them don't speak English. They come to the library and they learn, and they take out books and they read the newspaper. I love seeing my constituents also from the Cathedral Public Housing Development and residents from Castle Square, which is a little further up. But that public library in South End is probably one of the most diverse libraries you could possibly imagine. And finally, also in my district, David, is Copley Library. We're familiar with that, aren't we? But again, I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to, and I do want to say thank you to the library team for the professional work you are doing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilor Murphy, for bringing this issue forward. And thank you all for coming today. Just want to say that, I live, there's a library at the top of my street, and I know that, when my mom comes to watch the kids on Tuesdays, she looks at the schedule of the library and says, where are we going to, how do we get out of the house today? And takes them a walk up, and we were up there. The last time I was there last week was we were reading to a dog, one of those things. And my kids love it, right? And that's just at the one library at the top of our street. And I know that we've got some other great library investments going on in District 3. Fields Corner Library is underway. The Upham's Corner Library, I know, is in design, I believe. And, So I'm very excited for these things to happen, and I look forward to getting the questions, but I love the work you do, and it's funny, I think in life, you do a lot when you're young at the libraries, right? You're in the grade school, you go do your homework, you go study, and then you reach this lull in life where you think you're cool, and you know, all of a sudden you kind of get away from the library for a bit, and then as you get older again, you get back into it, and you go, wow, it's kind of a good transition in a way, because you come back and you realize how important they are, especially as you get older, for your kids, and how you should, you know, you wish you could have stayed with it throughout and said, I probably should have been coming a lot more. I'd be a much better counselor if I did, right? And so just the work that you guys do is awesome, the services you provide on a number of different levels for all communities. And so looking forward to see how we can help you guys and better serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Just want to note that we've also been joined by Counselor Durkin, but now I'll give the mic to Counselor Mejia.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the lead sponsor for bringing this to us. I last year filed a hearing order specifically looking at equity in terms of the hours of operation in certain neighborhoods and also programming for young people. I think that is, I'd love to hear as we open up for questions a little bit more about what we're doing across the city around issues like that. And since everyone is dropping names, I grew up in Fields Corner, so that was my library, just so you all know. That was my baby sitter in many ways, and so I do agree that our libraries play such a vital role in intergenerational fabric when we're looking at all of our residents. So we'd love to hear about what we need to do differently and how we can help support you all in terms of really reaching more folks. And then the other thing that I'd love to talk a little bit about is there is a bookstore in Roxbury called Frugal Bookstore. And while I know we're here talking about public libraries, I do believe there's an opportunity for us to figure out how we can partner up with other folks who may not be libraries, but they are bookstores, and they could be an extension to some of the work. Because I think that I'm always going to challenge the way we operate. I think that we really need to start pushing ourselves to think outside the box. And we can't think that the Boston Public Library is going to be the end all and hold space for everyone, right? So what role can you play in building stronger partnerships with nonprofit organizations and or local bookstores, or even those little tiny free little libraries that we see? I worked with a librarian, and I worked with her and one of the unions to create more little libraries. So now they are working with some of the Boston Public Schools and creating more, little libraries across the city of Boston. And so I think, there's a role for you all to play in that, and I'd love to hear what that would look like. And so the more innovative we can be, the more excited I am to participate in hearings, because I believe that it's one thing to complain and bring the problems to the forefront, but it's even more exciting to figure out how we're going to fix it. And that's what I'm really interested in. That's the conversation that I'm invested in, is figuring out where are the opportunities and what we need to do to help you get there. That's what I'm excited about. Unfortunately, I will be leaving a little bit earlier because I have a commitment at the State House at 3:30. So hopefully I'll be here long enough to ask my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Durkin?
Thank you so much, Chair. I really appreciate it. And thank you to the members of the panel for being here. My district has some very clear priorities when it comes to libraries. The West End Library is being redeveloped, and to be affordable housing, it's one of the most exciting projects that's going to really set the stage for what we can do as a city to build affordable housing on publicly owned land. It's super exciting. But in that process, that library will be displaced. And so just making sure that we have a place for people to access our library and what it means to community is so important. We have a West End Community Center that's emerging as part of mitigation for the Ragan building at MGH. And I'm thinking, can we have a conversation about what that looks like? That construction has started, they've gotten their permits, and they're off and running. So trying to have that coordination be present. The Fenway, obviously, the 1400 Boylston mitigation, it called for a Fenway branch of the public library, and I know Samuels and Associates, through their project, committed $17 million to build out a space. I know it, for some people, was smaller than folks wanted to see in terms of like the amount of feet. I want to make sure that we get a Fenway branch of the public library. It's something that my community members have really asked for. And then third, investments in the Parker Hill Library. Just want to be very clear, we got 3 things. So I want to thank Councilor Murphy for bringing this to the table, because these hearings are really opportunities to partner with our library. And thank you so much, David Leonard, for being here. I really appreciate it, and look forward to meeting with you about all of these things. But while I have the opportunity, I want to advocate for my district in those 3 ways. So I'd love to see, I got the capital, I was reading the Capitol. I would love to see an investment in the Parker Hill Library, so that's my 3rd thing. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, and thank you so much for all of you for being here. I really appreciate everything you do to ensure that our public libraries are the magical places that they should be for our kids and our families and our residents. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor. Council President Louis Jen.
Oh, the mic so soon. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the sponsors, and thank you to the libraries. Questions? Is that where
Opening remarks.
Opening remarks. Thank you. I know that everyone has their own library story, and I've shared it so many times. The Lower Mills Public Library, that was my early childhood care. And my sisters and I are just ever so grateful. In high school, I lived in the basement of the Central Public Library because of all the resources to provide someone like me whose parents didn't go to college with the knowledge and resources. I know the incredible work that you all are doing with new arrivals, so I thank you for all of that. It is the one place where people, rich or poor, the library is free and open to the public. I know that our librarians have been under heightened stress because of the harassment that they face in trying to figure out the legality around a limited public forum, and understanding how we make sure that the libraries are accessible, but that our librarians also feel very comfortable. David, you and I have had conversations about the role of the libraries in preserving community history, and especially preserving history that folks have been working on, like Jim Vrabel, projects that matter important a lot to me as a former tour guide of our local neighborhoods. So those are the things that I care about, that I want to uplift, not just now, but during budget. And we've had those initial conversations. I just want to thank all the libraries, Lower Mills, High Park, Mattapan, that matters so much to me, our central library, and all of our librarians. I think, past administrations have done a really good job of investing in libraries as we talk about libraries and affordable housing as the next phase of the work that we need to do to make sure that we are making use vertically, I think that's right, vertically, of all of our public spaces. So thank you, and I look forward to the work that we'll do together.
Thank you, Council President. Noting that we've been joined by also Councilor Anderson. Would you like to give opening remarks?
Thank you so much, Chair. No delays. Nice to see you all, and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. I guess what I'll say very briefly is that I just want to say thank you to the panelists for being here. I'm very blessed to have 3 beautiful libraries in my district: the Rosnell branch, the Hyde Park branch, and the Mattapan branch. All 3 that serve so many residents of mine that, just yesterday I was walking to a community meeting, and I witnessed 2 teenagers sigh because the Rosendale Library was already closed and they really wanted to go in. So I was happy to see that they were excited to go in, but it's a story of its own that people use them. And it's a gathering space for residents of all ages. So I'm just very thankful for Councilor Murphy for bringing this to the table, to having this conversation, and excited to advocate for those 3 libraries in my district. But with that, I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourselves and give any opening presentations that you may have.
Thank you, Councillor. I have some opening remarks, and I think there were comments that in each of the opening statements I would love to respond to, but maybe we can take those through questions
Yes.
After my opening remarks, if that's okay. My name is David Leonard. I have had the privilege of leading the Boston Public Library for the last 7 years. And it really has been a privilege. As you have all stated, it is an amazing institution and one which continues to grow and want to do better for all of the residents of Boston and beyond. So thank you for this hearing today pertaining specifically to our branch services. BPL was the first library in the country to have a branch. And that was the original East Boston branch dating back to opening in 1870. Current branch just celebrated 10 years at its current location, having opened in 2013, which kind of marks the start of the most recent 10 years of innovation and restoration and investment in many, many libraries that we hope, with your approval, will continue for many years to come. And these build on the great new spaces that came in the preceding decade as well as earlier. Today, BPL includes 25 branches across all of the neighborhoods of Boston, and our wonderful central library in Copley Square serving as the 26th branch for the Back Bay in particular. I'm joined on the panel today by Michael Colford, who is the Director of Library Services and who has overall responsibility for services to the public system-wide and at Central. And also to his right, Priscilla Foley, who's the Director of Neighborhood Services, to whom, along with 4 assistant managers, all of our branch librarians report in. We have 2 colleagues in the gallery behind me, our Chief of Staff, Sira Zafiris, and Emily Tokarczyk, our Chief Financial Officer, getting ready for hearing in 2 weeks' time, I think, but be that as it may. Speaking of our branches, each branch is open about 48 hours during a given week. Normally 10 to 6, with at least one late opening day of 12 to 8, and then typically on Fridays and Saturdays 9 to 5. Just 3 noted exceptions to that. Chinatown, as a temporary space, doesn't have weekend hours. Up in the corners had some staffing challenges, and so it's still 2 o'clock on Saturdays. And then the South End, as Councillor Flynn noted, is currently closed pending a major renovation. This latter expansion on Saturdays to 9 to 5 at most locations was made possible through the city budget of the last 2 years. That allowed us to add staff on the front lines and expand those opening hours. And I think, as you have noted, those have been incredibly well received and welcomed by our patrons. The buildings themselves, as you've also noted, are essential to our offerings. They're no longer just the containers in which our books and our staff and our services occur, but they are themselves part of our service, the space itself. And over the last 10 years, we have started to think of that more intentionally as part of what we have to offer our communities. And so this has been an opportunity to renovate, to modernize, and offer some special different components that are responsive to the community needs as articulated during our programming studies. Some examples include the Tech Lab at Jamaica Plain, the Faneuil branch with its dedicated community room and new children's space, the Adam Street branch with its music rehearsal space, the Roxbury Nutrition Lab, Roslindale with its own dedicated teen area, just to name a few. The earlier period did also include building renovations at Parker Hill, some modest improvements at South Boston, West Roxbury, Hyde Park, and Lower Mills, and then obviously also, as noted, the addition of the temporary space in the China Trade Center, pending a full new branch coming online in the years to come. Services at branches are wide-ranging. And I believe Councillor Murphy already noted that in looking at the calendar of what is on offer. They span education and learning, they span arts and culture, they span human and civic services. Many are also technology focused, in some cases directly addressing the digital equity gap. They cover all age ranges and a variety of topics, often leveraging community partners, but we would like to do more. In many cases, they leverage and partner with strong and active friends groups. And in addition, there are several central-based teams that amplify the work in branches, such as our community learning team, and members who spend time offering programs in our neighborhoods that augment the capacity of our local branch staffs. We do think of ourselves as one library, but at the same time having unique and individual characteristics in each neighborhood. The library uses its reach statistic to gauge overall usage by patrons. It's an amalgamation of circulation, books checked out, location visits, programs offered, program attendance, and technology usage. And as of last December, we were at 99% already pre-COVID levels. So the library is back, maybe not in exactly the same way as we were before, and the same in all locations, but in aggregate, we are strong. We see strong usage across the system. In some cases, it's definitely about books. In other cases, it's more about the space or other services being availed of. But it is in all cases our incredible staff that make all of this happen and come to life for our patrons, for the residents of Boston and beyond. And as we continue to make our way through our active vacancy list, we look forward to even stronger offerings and connections with our community. And so I will pause there and we'll be happy to take questions, respond to questions and comments from the councillors.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for that. So I'll give the opportunity to all the councilors to ask your questions. I'll make sure that you all get about 7 minutes to do the first round, and then we'll do a second round. And then I'm going to start with the original sponsor of this hearing order, Councilor Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you for your opening remarks. And like you mentioned, many of my colleagues in their opening remarks kind of already advocated and had questions. One thing I did say to the chair while someone was speaking is, as an at-large city councilor, I always love the district councilor's passion for knowing, they get into the weeds about what's really happening in their neighborhoods and their districts, and they've already highlighted a lot of needs, but also uplifting the wonderful things that are happening at their branch library. So thank you to my district councilors for uplifting that. I think it's important, like I said earlier too, that if we only speak to you during the budget time, that it doesn't give us this opportunity to talk about, I think, get deeper into the needs. And if any chance we can shine a light, I don't want our libraries ever to be in a situation like our school buildings or our community centers where we're trying to patch holes and climb out of, a real deficit. So I do know there's lots of investment and there's lots of renovations. The Adam Street Library, was torn down, some build up from the forms, but one thing I would like to talk about is when I was with the Fields Corner branch and they're about to be shut down, or during the time Adam Street branch was closed, the Friends of the Library did a good job, and I do know there's probably some protocol for it, but what happens to those services? And can we, I know they were talking about maybe the children's librarian in Fields Corner could spend a couple days at the ice cream spot, in the neighborhood, so people do know, because we do see there's a group of people, right, in Fields Corner. There's a large Vietnamese community that comes and that helps them with their translation and doing, taxes and getting online, and there's kids who come for homework help. So when they go to the closed door, and then we know in the South End, it's been closed for years, where can we lead them? And can we connect that with the staff that's already on board, or do we just move that staff to another branch? And if you could touch on that.
Thank you, Councillor. It's absolutely a combination of those answers, and Priscilla will go into more detail in a second, but we absolutely commit to continuing service for communities when branches are closed. We don't have unfortunately, a magic space that we can just pop up to replace those, but our staff, our programs do continue. And certainly over the last number of renovations, including Adam Street that you mentioned, that has been the case. Yes, the community gets very nervous right before a branch closes, but then adjusts, works with us. We listen to what they ask for, and then we will ensure those services, to the best we can, continue during a closure.
Yeah, we are very fortunate to have amazing staff that continue to serve the neighborhoods. One of the, just mentioning Frugal Books, when this was years ago when we closed Roxbury for their renovation, the staff there did programming there, so they did book clubs there, they did story times there, and they really relied on us. And part of that is those relationships that the staff established before they closed. And so right now for Fields Corner, our team is doing very similar work to seeing like where the best places are for them to continue that work, because it is important for the community to see that, but it's also really important for the staff to continue those services and continue those relationships. More recently, our Faneuil branch in Brighton, the children's librarian there was in the community 3 or 4 times a week, just continuing to do services, and then story times, crafts, and additionally our branch librarian was continuing book group, Spanish classes, and all of those things were continued in the neighborhood.
That's good. One last thing at this round. So you're in the different neighborhood branches directly. What is the biggest concern or something that you hear that you would like us on the council to help advocate for?
Well, one of the things that we actually just started this week in Hyde Park, we partnered with our colleagues in digital equity, and we are doing one-on-one Haitian Creole tech help. It just started on Tuesday, so it's a huge need. Those relationships were established, and now we're doing it. So when we see needs, we really do try to connect those needs with people that are doing the work and people that want to come in and do the work.
It's wonderful.
I would add, Councillor, that I commend you for looking through the list of things on offer, because often we find residents they themselves don't even know all of the things that are on offer. So greater opportunities to amplify, so to ensure that these incredible programs that the staff have put together have the widest reach possible.
Well attended, yes. Thank you.
If I could just add.
Yeah, sure.
If I could just add as well, in addition to the fantastic branch staff that becomes available even while their facilities closed, we do have a team of staff that are based in the central library but work system-wide on outreach, and they provide a lot of specialized services, including workforce development, English as a second language, tutoring, and public instruction for digital literacy. And we may not have a magical pop-up that we can bring, but we, starting this summer, we will be relaunching our BPL by Bike service, which is a couple of e-bikes and then a cart that we can fill with technology or with books. We can sign up library cards, and I've already been talking to them. They're going to be in the South End at least once a week, parked in front of the branch. So there will be some new books. They'll be able to sign people up for library cards. They might even be able to bring holes over there. We're not sure yet. But so we can continue the services any way we can.
That's wonderful. I'll be looking for those e-bikes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Pass it over to Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you, David, and to the team here. I wanted to focus first on the South End Library. Residents continue to advocate for a beautiful new three-story library that I support. That would include a dedicated senior space for writing, computer use, but also, as I highlighted in my opening statement, the large Latino community in the South End as well. I think there should be a dedicated space for Latino patrons using computers, collections, relevant resources. They're a high percentage of the South End Roxbury community. Residents also ask for a functional kitchen. They want to learn about culinary, nutritional workshops. We're close to Mass and Cass, as you know, and we would like to see a place for patrons to store their belongings as well. Also, just logistically, one logistic issue is the building should not encroach on the alley shared between the South End Library and abutters. It is a dedicated fire lane as well as a right-of-way lane, and we should preserve the egress. I've been meeting with residents and friends groups, my friend Marlene and Yvette, and so many wonderful residents throughout Villa Victoria. But David, I really want to go to bat for them. It's important that the Latino community, the Asian community in Chinatown, and the Asian community in the South End, I should say, have a state-of-the-art public library. They really deserve that, and want to see what your thoughts are.
Thank you, Councillor, for your advocacy for my own neighborhood as well, as a South End resident. Give all of our branch renovations of the last several years have been award-winning from an architecture and design point of view, all of them. And so we agree that we should build a state-of-the-art library in the South End, or quite frankly, anywhere else that we do. Where we are in the capital planning process right now, we are, because the South End closed for catastrophic facilities issues, we, in agreement with the mayor and the community, decided on an accelerated programming and design process. We are about a half to 2/3 of the way through the programming stage, which is going at least 3 or 4 times as fast as it would normally go. And we are still in the intake of ideas, vetting of ideas stage, and the architects on board, UTEAL, are processing all of that intake. The next community meeting, I think, will be at the beginning of June to come back to the community with what those proposals look like. That is the time period where if there are hard decisions or choices or compromises or more advocacy to happen, that is the time when we will look at what the architects come up with and say, does it meet our needs? Does it meet community needs? Which ones can it meet? Which ones can it not meet? We may have some preliminary budget information that will help shape those conversations. So at this point, and I think Priscilla can attest to this, all ideas are still, very much welcome and being recorded and vetted.
Well, thank you, David, and I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the feedback and your willingness to work with us. I really need to advocate for a 3-story, 3-floor library. I think that's critical. That's what it will take to ensure that everybody has equal access to this library, a welcoming library. And I know it'll be a welcoming library, but it's important that it is three levels, so we are able to ensure that there's an opportunity for residents from Mass and Cass, residents from Villa Victoria, residents from the Cathedral, residents from Castle Square, which is up the road. It plays a critical role in the South End and Roxbury as well, and I think it's very important that we do have 3 levels, and I'm going to advocate for that. That's something that residents have stressed to me, and I want to make sure I advocate for them 100%, like I would any other neighborhood. But I do see state-of-the-art libraries around the city, and they're wonderful. They're beautiful buildings, but I want to see the South End have a beautiful building as well. So I hope you can continue working with me and the South End residents. I know I have the support of my colleagues here in the council, but also the state legislature as well. Anyway, I want to say thank you. I'm going to hold my rest of my questions and give my other colleagues an opportunity to weigh in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. And before we continue, I just want to make sure my colleagues know we also have a second panel of non-administration personnel from the Friends of the South End Library. So in regards to Councillor Flynn's comments, we will be able to chat with them after as well. But with that, I want to continue on to, I believe it's Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do have a South End question, but maybe we'll save it for the second panel. A couple things I just want to talk about. Again, the great service that you guys do provide currently, whether it's the Lego Club or the Read to a Dog or all the things that my kids do, I see it very much through the youth perspective. One concern I have there is at the computers at the library, at least for the Adams Street Library, but I assume similar programs are on most of the libraries throughout. Some of the games that come up are maybe not of age appropriate for kids, right? There's one, there was an icon there. I was taking him the other day, watch what he was playing. And, there's scarier games like zombies and stuff like that, right? And then there was one icon that just had a gun on it. And you could click on that, and it was a game where you shoot things. And I said, well, that doesn't seem to be the best, right, for this. So I just wanted to raise that, not as not upset, but just saying that's something I think we should probably look into about I know those public computers can be used for a number of things, but just even around the kids' stuff about what is on that for kids, because I know there was even a chat room that I saw some other kids access next to me, and some of the stuff that was being discussed in the chat room was also very inappropriate, right? And this was happening through the library. So I just wanted to flag that for you guys as maybe some stricter reviews of what the computer is allowed to do. I know it's difficult in today's age especially, but just a couple things I've noticed there. I did get an email or a text or something the other day about the art that's going in front of the Adams Street Library and giving residents a chance to vote on what type of thing they'd like to see, whether it was sort of the Mayflower ship bringing over the immigrants in the different colors and made up to look like triple deckers as a nod to Dorchester and things like that. And I thought that was an awesome way to do it. I've got to fill it out, so I'm going to out myself there. I haven't filled it out yet, if I still have time. But I thought that was, when I saw that, I just said, oh, kudos to them. That's a great way to reach out and say, and just the fact that you're adding public art on public land, I think that's a huge add for any community and any library across the city. So more of that is welcomed. I know there was some interior art that they were looking at as well. All for that, and however we can help continue to support that effort. But again, in my seeing it around the youth, I know that I'm probably leaving out what your partnerships are with Age Strong community and senior services. And so a chance for you guys to talk about your partnerships there and what you provide at the libraries around that. Please and thank you.
Thank you. We'll absolutely take a look at the cybersecurity issues. It's always something to keep up with.
Yeah.
Always a challenge, but we do have standards we try and maintain, so if something isn't, we're happy to address that. Our art program really is in partnership, public art in partnership with the city's Office of Arts and Culture, and allocations in past years from the capital budget to support that work, so we're happy to be partnering on that. I will defer to my colleagues on the Never Too Late and Age Strong partnerships for our more older residents.
Thank you, sir.
So one of the things that we're working with actually the Age Strong department right now is our wonderful colleague Andrea Burns is actually visiting all of the locations to make sure they are dementia friendly, and so she has a checklist and meeting with branch staff to make sure that the way that we're presenting is able to be bringing in people that may be living with dementia. So that's one, like, just an immediate thing. Some of these things I'm just like thinking about, this just happened this week, so that is part of that.
Sorry, can I ask, so dementia friendly means what, or requires what?
So
I'm not familiar.
No, it's a checklist that Age Strong actually come up with. Like, so for example, some things like making sure there's seating that's not near reflective surfaces is one thing. And what I can do is, rather than trying to repeat everything, I can send it to you so they can be there. But so they have a criteria that they have. Some of it's noise and levels, okay. And so they're going to actually on site to visit all of our locations, including our central location, to make sure that we are a safe space for people that are living with dementia. Additionally, we have programming for older adults, and with the last year's budget passing, we have our first Age Strong librarian. So at West Roxbury, they will be focusing on programming for older adults in the West Roxbury area, and then also providing support for other locations.
Great.
And I'll just mention that department I had mentioned before, community learning, they also have a staff person who is located permanently in the Mattapan branch, and she does this really great, a couple of programs that they call Silver Tech, that they do computer training for older adults, and that's been very, very popular, and she's built quite a nice community around there. And then just, I don't want to overlook, at the Central Library, we do our Never Too Late programming, which is once once a month all year round, and is the longest running program, continuously running program in the library, and that is focused towards older adults. And we get people coming in from all over the city, and it's anything from screening a film to bringing an author in to talk, to do some wellness meditation. So it runs the gamut, and that's very popular.
Great. Is there outreach done around that to the senior homes? I'm thinking of my Keystone and Savin Hill Apartments and things like that. That you reach out and say, we can either bring you there, because I know transportation can be a kind of brutal, and or we can come to you and provide some of these services, library.
Yeah, that's more of what they have been starting to do more of in the outreach department, is bringing services to assisted living homes and different housing places where the seniors are.
Lastly, I know I'm probably running out of time, but just the proximity of, I'm thinking of the Adams Street Library to the Kenny School, the Boston Public Schools. I know there is some communication, but I'd love to see that strengthened, only because the Kenny is an old school. It doesn't have a gym, it doesn't have a theater or space to congregate, and so I'd love to see the library, that relationship grow to how they can both help each other.
Yeah, we think the opportunities for greater partnership between all of the Boston Public Schools, and indeed the parochial and charter schools for that matter, is really, really strong. We convened for the first time ever last fall a meeting of all of the BPL youth librarians and BPS school librarians to start a more integrated collaboration. And so I think that's the symbol of the type of collaboration we can expect more of going forward.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. I will leave my time. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Counselor. Right on time. Counselor Mejia.
Thank you. So I just have 3 questions. Lucky you. I'm curious about workforce development opportunities. I used to work in that space, working specifically with people who were transitioning out of shelter. And what I learned in my time there was that a lot of folks who were living in shelter would have to leave the shelter for a particular time and find other spaces and places to go. Sometimes they would look for work, sometimes they wouldn't. And I'm sure that sometimes people are spending time in the library. And I'm curious what, if any, opportunities exist for a workforce development pipeline for some of the folks who are usual frequent users of particular libraries, and what programming, if any, you have considered to help create pathways to employment for folks who are unhoused, because I know that that is definitely an opportunity for growth in that area. And I'm also curious about the hours of operations. I know certain spaces and places are operating at certain spaces and times that others are not so much so, and I'd love to have a better understanding from an equity perspective of why those discrepancies exist in certain neighborhoods. And then I did say 3, and I'm gonna throw in one more because I wanted to follow up on Frugal Bookstore. You had mentioned it as a partnership while the library was closed and in transition, and I'm curious what, if anything, you've done since opening, and how you can continue to maintain programming and opportunities to help support some of these smaller businesses across the area. And then lastly, because we've had an uptick with migrants, I'm curious what your programming has looked like in terms of multilingual and services, and what neighborhoods you have seen a greater need, especially around language access and services for those areas that you've seen, particularly in Mattapan.
Michael and Priscilla will probably be the main respondents to that, but I think on the last point, I'm certainly aware that for some of our author programs, we have continued to leverage not just Frugal, but Trident and other independent bookstores as being the suppliers of books to those areas. We don't believe they have necessarily the capacity to support our larger book buying contracts, but certainly where there are opportunities, we want to continue to do that. The question on workforce development speaks directly to what we set as an internal priority coming out of COVID as being one of the biggest areas of need. There are now other reasons why that's a continuing area of need, and there are teams under Michael's area that are directly responding to that.
Yeah, the workforce development is a great question, and it's one that we've done a lot of work on in the last several years. So that community learning team I mentioned consists of 3 departments that come together to really support workforce development. The first is around digital literacy. It's our instruction team. The second is our ESL and literacy team, which helps people who don't speak English as a first language. And the third is our workforce development team. So many people who come in looking for a job sometimes feel uncomfortable because they don't speak English very well, or they don't know how to use a computer, and of course you can't apply for a job without filling out a form online. So these 3 teams work together. In the last several years we hired 2 career counselors, and 1 general career counselor and 1 for youth specifically, and then we have 2 workforce development librarians. And I'll just mention the career counselor who has gotten a promotion since then. We're about to backfill that position. We just got someone to take over that position, which we're very grateful, because she had started a lot of really fantastic momentum working in all the branches, working with many partner companies and organizations to go to career fairs. She was developing a pipeline with one of the airlines for potential job tracks. So there was a lot of work headed in that direction. We've always prepared people for workforce, like taught them how to write an interview, or taught them how to write a resume or do an interview. But we were trying to be more proactive in working with partner organizations that we could actually start placing people into job application scenarios. We also, you mentioned some of the people who are returning citizens or some of the unhoused folk. We're just about to start, we're in the testing phase to launch a welcome card. So a library card, you need to provide an address, you need to provide an ID. There's a lot of barriers. So with this welcome card, really we're kind of eliminating all the verification that you need to do so that they can easily get a card. We may limit the number of books they can check out or something like that, but they would be able to use all of our computers, they would be able to access all our services with a very small, they wouldn't really need to provide proof of address or anything like that. So it's really to help in that area.
A quick question though, I just want to follow up, is specifically around some of the folks who, and I'm sure the folks who work in these libraries actually know who, or potentially maybe unhoused, right? So I'm curious what, if any, opportunities exist for engagement, because what I always say is that Boston is resource rich, but we're coordination poor.
Sure.
And there are so many opportunities to really get people back in.
Yeah.
And even if it's that branch, that it provides someone who's unhoused a job, whether it's a stipend position, whether it's something short term, but whether it's something that you're here, and we know that you're here from 9 to 3, why, what opportunities, if any, can you think of to provide these folks with some ways to have gainful employment? I'm just curious.
I think we should take that as an action item to reflect on. Because there are some barriers to that I think would be difficult, but we should take that as an action item to reflect on and see if there is a way to make those connections. I think one additional component, maybe Michael, you could talk about the social work team that we have, because they're already set up to connect to the people that you have in mind. And so going from, not just joining the first 2 dots, but joining the 3rd dot, that's something we can think about.
The only reason why I'm going to bring that up here and just hop on it just a little bit longer is that I believe that we can set the example of what it looks like, right? In my office, I have a whole new model, right? Most of the people that work in my office have never worked, the majority of them, ever in city government, and they probably would never have worked in city government unless I've given them the opportunity, because some of them don't even speak English, and some of them don't even have degrees, but they all have the capacity. And so my idea in this little experiment that I have is to create opportunities for folks who would never be able to step foot in here and show what is possible when we give people opportunities. And I think the same, considering there's so many branches, that I have to advocate for different ways of creating opportunities for
And we
folks.
at least always need some level of part-time shelving work in different locations, so that's probably the obvious opportunity for us to
It's
reflect
a low
on.
threshold.
Right.
It's an entry point. It's an opportunity to give people some dignified work and ways for them to move on up.
Counselor, I know you said you had to leave early. Do you have one more question you wanted to ask before you?
Oh, I heard that. You guys,
I'll be
all these
flexible.
newbies got me all traumatized every time I come to these hearings. I hear the thing and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna get shut down. You know, I wanna be mindful that I have other colleagues that are waiting. I do have a 3:15 hard stop. So I just wanna leave with that as something that I really would love to, even if it's a partnership with you and your team to brainstorm together and pilot something that potentially could be a workforce development pipeline to work in libraries. They're already there. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think.
I will just add one thing. This is kind of a step removed, but we do have a social worker on staff. We have a social work program that we're developing, and one of the new positions, because you also asked about bilingual or serving people with other languages. One of our new positions that we're in the process of putting through the approval process was a bilingual peer navigator. So someone who has lived experience either with homelessness or mental illness, who has been certified to work as a peer navigator with the social worker, to really work with other community members who are in similar situations in branches. So that position hopefully will be hired in the next 2 or 3 months, and that will be another step to reach that community.
And that would be a position that I would advocate for strongly, replicating it.
Yes.
Because, right, so let's,
So we can have more.
Yeah, I appreciate the extra time, Chair, and I really do appreciate your efforts and look forward to partnering with you all. I'll stay here until it's time for me to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Durkin.
Thank you so much. I think I've made my priorities in this hearing very clear. I literally ran to this hearing. I was getting other calls and I was like, there is no more important place I could be right now, because the Boston Public Library and our branch libraries are the center of everything our communities ask me for and need. So I'll start with the West End. You mentioned we commit to continuing service for communities when branches are closed, and I know you don't have magic pop-ups that happen, and I know how hard it is, and I know staffing is a challenge. But given the upcoming, though not immediate, closure of the West End Library, thanks to the approved development of affordable housing and library services, can you give me an expectation of what the public process will look like in that? And obviously, I need to advocate for my community. This is something that I've heard about since the start of my campaign. We need a temporary location of the West End Library. As you know, it's 0.5 miles away from the North End. It serves a lot of elderly and disabled people. It is one of the favorite branch libraries in the city, and it's over a mile away from Copley. And given how hard it is to traverse this area in particular, to people with mobility challenges, it's very important that there be something in the community. I mentioned one idea, which is the West End Community Center, which obviously we would have to line up. But just, I'm eager, I'm excited to talk about this and to partner with you. I'm happy to look into locations myself and loop you all in. My office and my staff and myself are so dedicated to this, so just curious what the public process could look like.
Yeah, so on the temporary piece, when we get closer to the actual potential closing date, we'll be deeply engaged with the community and listening to their needs. In the most recent example of the South End, we have run programs at the United South End Settlement Use of Space. We are currently, I think, moving to the Blackstone Community Center, so there's a model there. And additionally, with respect to the mobility, elderly, challenged individuals who may have difficulty traversing a large part of the city, we actually partnered with Age Strong on having a shuttle run from the closed location to the neighboring branches. So we'll have some data on how that has been received. So there are definitely creative solutions in addition to things that both Priscilla and Michael have talked about. The West End and indeed Upham's Corner will have the benefit of the Chinatown mixed-use development being further along, and so we will be learning from that to apply different lessons for the future projects. With respect to public process, the overall development process, which will jointly be run by the BPDA and the Mayor's Office of Housing as strong partners, will have either the Article 80 process or the equivalent of the Article 80 process for public input. Regardless, the library, as it gets closer to design activities, will run its standard community advisory committee process with the community in parallel with this other. Maybe it could be the same group with just different functions or different agendas, but we would never do a branch development without having robust community process.
Thank you so much, and I know how much love and care is going to go into this particular location, and I think what I'm honestly concerned about is just unlike other closures, which are because of flood or natural disaster, we actually have time to figure this one out. So I just want to ensure that we start the communication and that now, because we actually have the time, and so let's not squander it, So I'll move on to the next one. So I appreciated the mention of the Parker Hill Library, and I know in 2018 there was a reopening of the Parker Hill Library. There were amendments to like the facade and the inside, but I think a lot of folks are interested in just more investment there, also to make sure that the student communities are just as connected to that library. There's a changing population of that neighborhood and of Mission Hill, and we also have a huge commitment to making sure, I know the Friends of the Parker Hill Library do extensive work in trying to engage the community, but I think there are things that we could do to make it better, and obviously I've taken Zoom calls from the basement, and I know that space could be reinvigorated. So I just want to here advocate for more time and attention be given to the Parker Hill Library.
Thank you. Maybe we could do a follow-up on that, just to hear about your specific ideas. And I think we believe that the opportunity for greater outreach to the changing community is certainly a tangible thing we could work on together.
Thank you so much. And third, the Fenway. Thank you so much. So 1400 Boylston, I was incredibly excited to see the inclusion, technically of a civic space, but trying to be made to be a library. I know a lot of the support for that project was contingent upon that was the major benefit of this project, other than the affordable housing at 165 Park Drive. The major benefit of this project was a branch of the public library. I think it's incredibly important that we fulfill this commitment to the community to as the community grows, as the population of the Fenway grows, with all of the expansion of housing and the amount of people that are moving to the Fenway and the amount of approvals that we've done for housing, the amenities in the neighborhood need to grow, in line with the increase of people and families. That is the number one thing I've heard from the Fenway community since I started as a city councilor, and I really thank my predecessor for starting the conversation with Samuels and Associates in doing that. I just want to ensure that we fulfill that commitment, and I know there's been conversation sort of prior to that commitment, and I know, sorry, I said $17 million, it's $12 million to build out the space, which was included. If it's a financial gap, I would love to talk about that. If it's a square footage gap, I would love to talk about that. But I just wanted to ensure that you heard my interest in there being a Fenway branch of the library at that location, and that the community be part of the public process. I think I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit over, but it's very important that it's just in the perfect location, and the outside of the building is going to be taken care of in perpetuity. There's a huge opportunity for there to be outdoor amenities associated with this library if we are to call it a library. So I just wanted to, David, get your take on how you feel about there being a library at that location, because we haven't had the opportunity to talk about it.
The concept as we understand it is geared towards being a civic space to be potentially used as a satellite branch library, and that the available square footage is about 5,000 square foot coming out of this opportunity. We have a very robust capital plan as things exist already, dealing with many of the existing branches that need a lot of attention. And so we're continuing to be happy and welcome the opportunity to vet this idea and to understand how it would work. One of our requirements is to do what you just asked for, which is hear more directly from the community, and that is what a programming study actually does. Our understanding is that some of those funds from the mitigation side of this deal will be made available to conduct a programming study, maybe an accelerated one, I'm not sure yet, so that we can understand which of the community's needs could be best served by a 5,000 square foot space coming online.
And if I can follow up just for a second, respectfully, I think the commitment of this space is not just for the current residents, it's for the future residents. And I think it's so important that we center their needs. If we want communities and families to move to an area, we need to provide public amenities. And I never get on to, I think at the capital budget, it was very clear my district doesn't have the same public amenities as other districts. They have made their own public amenities. This is a real opportunity through mitigation to deliver on a public amenity in my district, and I want to fight for that. So thank you so much.
We agree on predicting future use as part of the assessment. Our programming studies always look to what the evolving demographics are based upon BPDA data, other inputs. So we agree it's not just a point-in-time assessment, but is an exercise in planning for the future.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a lot of my questions are basically about using resources that exist, or community partners, and figuring out what exists and what doesn't. So my first question is about assessments that are, or have you actually done an assessment to analyze need for libraries throughout Boston?
So we did a facilities assessment, which now dates back to 2012, and that basically informed what is the current slate of capital projects, the ones completed and the ones coming down the pipeline. And as I mentioned in response to Councillor Durkin's question, during any programming study, we do a projection of demographic changes. We do deep engagement with the community in terms of what their needs are. And the last time we did a wide-ranging community assessment was during our 2008, 2009, 2010 strategic planning process. I'm very pleased to share that we have just begun an updated strategic planning process for the library that we will be moving to a community engagement phase later this year. I don't yet have the specificity or exactly the scope of what that will be, but it will provide us an opportunity to do that. That's, I think, a partial response to your question in terms of an assessment of the city. In terms of its need for libraries, I'm not sure that we have done such a thing.
Thank you. And so if we don't know where libraries are needed, right? Where do we go from there, or how do we know how much space we need, or how many people need to use libraries? So really interested in that conversation offline. Also, have we done some sort of comparative analysis to understand equity, or how our libraries are equitable considering demographics? And I understand the demographic studies, or what did you call it?
Yeah, assessments
to understand need, but this is a different question. A comparative analysis would actually procure whether or not it's been equitable.
What I can tell you is that when we're in dialogue with the Public Facilities Department and with the Budget Office about the prioritization of branch renovation projects, Collectively, we pay deep attention to what else is happening in a given neighborhood, as well as the pace and distribution of branch projects across the system. So we at least do that as a way of ensuring equitable investment of capital resources.
That makes sense. So basically, in your planning, subjective to that particular development of that particular library.
Or a particular year.
A
You know,
particular year.
We had Rosendale, Roxbury, and Adams Street all active as projects, 3 very different areas of the city, all at one time. So I think that there's an intention to ensure that we're responsive to different areas of the neighborhood, and it's not all going in one area.
I understand. In District 7, I can count 1.5 because half of South End is in District 7. But in my colleagues, they have about 3 and a half, maybe more. I don't know, maybe there's a half. And so I would say that there needs to be some sort of assessment to understand how long does it take people to get to libraries and accessibility and so forth. And then there's a whole conversation about access and schedules. When you look at Back Bay, and I understand very well used, their schedules are obviously open longer hours, other days that Roxbury is not. Can you tell me, outside of budget, what other reasons are there for that?
The Central Library serves as not just the headquarters for the entire system, but is also used by, so everyone who uses a branch, but half of those people also use the Central Library based upon our statistical analysis. So it's heavily used. It also is for the Back Bay. It offers a wider range of services than any individual smaller branch can be. So I think applying, so I think the criteria are different for the opening hours of the Central Library versus any of the branches.
Understood. May I?
Yeah.
In terms of connecting that to equity,
Yeah.
then it means that it cannot be equal to other districts or other squares, that we are looking at the need for that specific neighborhood, as you were saying. I know that we were talking about facilities, but in terms of equitable access, we're talking about keeping it open longer because a place like Roxbury has, I'm not going to compete with other districts, but when it comes to talking about equity, we do have to compare to outside areas, right? So affluent communities like Fenway, like Back Bay, do have plenty of amenities, oh my God. But then when you go to Roxbury, I actually did an asset mapping study with Northeastern and found that we have nothing. And then by nothing, I mean like we have barbershops, we have liquor stores, we have fast foods, and I mean like a couple, Popeyes, McDonald's, yeah, something like that, twice. 2, we don't have restaurants, we don't even have a juice bar, we don't even, I don't know, a shoe store, I don't know, we don't have anything. And so we're working on this, and hopefully in partnership with the administration in terms of, and I feel like this is separate. This is part city for public amenities. This is part development planning for developers. But this then, right, impacts the use of the library. I used to have a lot of clients that are either homeless or suffering from mental health instabilities. And the library is a safe haven from abuse, from home, or from the shelter. And so I would advocate that Roxbury's library should equitably should be open much later than other communities in affluent areas.
Yeah, we were very happy to be able to do the renovation of Roxbury for some of the very reasons that you mentioned.
And it's amazing. It's beautiful.
It's one of the 2 largest branches outside of the Central Library in the whole system.
And that's equitable. And that's like, I think we deserve more. So I think, and I love you for it. I just, I think I'm going to discuss, certain not just amenities, but programmatic stuff like, do you have library associations, grants, funding opportunities outside of city, professional development programs, library management software, community engagement tools, and can you speak about that in sort of one summary? My time is up. My time is up, but also before I finish, because I'm not going to be able to talk again until the second round. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair. In terms of the library in South End, I agree. I think that they do need a third floor, and it's not because like South Enders are here. It's really like, no, this is pragmatic. Like they need more space. And we're talking about amenities and programs and accessibility. That library is so tight. I used to volunteer a long time ago, and they used to have like a senior program, reading books to kids and all that, and I did that. And we would sit like in like tight corners. It's so bad. So there's no way to go up because there's no, right? Longitudinal, we can't do anything. So do you agree with that? Should we have a third floor? What's going on? Can you help us with this?
Yeah. So in answer to your
Programmatic stuff,
yes.
facility of South End.
So in preparation for the budget hearing, we'll be providing, I think it's now 40-page report on all of the programs and services offered. So I think some of what your middle question is asking will be in there.
Okay.
I do think from a tools and associations and best practices and standards, we have access to a lot of that already. What I think would be interesting is to, I agree with you, is to take the equity lens and apply it to some of those particular standards and see how would they work in Boston. With respect to the South End, I want the size to be driven by what the program requirements are and what the site will allow. The architects have shown us, and this is a public meeting, so the architects have shown us I think 3 models or versions already. The 2-floor option already doubles the amount of program usable space in the building and does so by preserving the park, almost the entirety of the park, which were 2 really, really important things we heard from that community. So, you know, as I said earlier, we're going to see the conversation continue. Size will be driven by what the program looks for and also what the budget ultimately is going to be.
Mr. Chair, may I wrap up, please? Yes. To that. Again, equitable lens.
Yes.
South End, yes, most people there have money.
Not
Some
all.
money.
Right.
Most have middle class, right? We can say that. But, I mean, the average income is decent. However, equitably, when we're talking about amenities, South End suffers. They can't even go outside to do anything outside. There's nothing in terms of space, outdoor recreation. There's a lot of restaurants and stuff that Roxbury doesn't have, I get it. However, if we can build up, if we can zone up in a way to add these amenities, that's the compromise to development. The Alexander Hotel is going to go up. It's probably going to go up pretty high. If we're doing stuff like that, my job is to bring community voice and say, how are we incorporating community in that? How are we including it? How are we developing responsibly without displacement? It means that you're adding those amenities to address some of those social determinants of health and health in general. And I think it's more than just the use that's been presented. I think it's equitable space to create that amenities that we're talking about, or space to apply those amenities.
Yeah, I mean, let's continue to hear what those amenities are, and are they things that a library has the core mission to actually provide, and then ultimately, if the answer is yes, can we afford it, right? Okay. Because when we go to a beyond. Well, our ideal standard is actually a first floor library, is like a single story, like Adam Street's probably the most recent best example. East Boston's another great one.
Adam Street to get affordable housing on top of it, but that's not my district.
It's too late. We're already done.
Oh, okay.
About additions to libraries.
Second round, go ahead.
there are a lot of merits, and we're very supportive of the Chinatown, Upham's Corner, West End mixed use and housing specific, affordable housing in particular, opportunities. And so I think our ideal is a single-story library because the sight lines are better, the ease of circulation and navigation is better. We have many libraries that we like that are two-story or have a story and a mezzanine. Even Roxbury at 27,000 square feet is kind of on that model. When we get to a third story, it provides an operational challenge and a staffing challenge that doesn't exist with the other models. But let's have the process continue, and we'll see what comes out of it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I think community partnership can help mitigate that. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. This is my turn. So, some conversations that have been happening with parents and Rosno specifically is that they're looking for, they call it an indoor playground or indoor third space during winter time when the weather starts to get cold. They want to see this happen on weekends specifically. Rosinell's branch isn't open too late on Saturdays. I think it's just 2 p.m.
5 p.m. now.
5 p.m. now. But they were also exploring the ideas of potentially one Sunday a month where there could be activities during the winter time because thankfully our family population is growing with younger kids. But as a parent of 2 kids myself, it is difficult to find a place we can go to on a Sunday. We either go to the mall or we go stroll at Target. But
not quite the same experience.
Not quite the same experience. Is this something we've considered to do extended hours during cold winter times to create space for families or just for anyone in general that just wants to be somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think we would all love more libraries to be open longer hours. I think no one would argue with that in principle. It is a function of our staffing models and our hiring patterns, and we were thrilled over the last 2 years to get to the place where we could do 9 to 5 on Saturdays instead of at least 9 to 2 or even shorter hours in some cases. And so we are continuing to work through the existing backlog of vacancies in staffing. And so I don't know that there'll be an opportunity in the coming year to address that, but I expect that would be a common thing we might hear from communities during the strategic planning process we're about to do. So it may be that a year from now we're coming back with that is an area that should be the priority for future investment.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is something that a lot of residents will bring up. In regards to the Hyde Park Library, there's something I really love about there is they have a seed library for plants and for gardens. I don't know, does this happen at other libraries across the city?
Yeah. Ooh, it does.
And you don't have to bring them back, right?
Right.
That's not a lending
But you can
library.
bring some seeds back after you...
Okay, that's great. I mean, residents love that, continue to support that. I myself, I don't have a garden, but I love to have plants in the house, so I actually use that resource as well for my family.
Yeah, I think that there are many opportunities for us to expand beyond the traditional things you might check out from a library. We're being very cautious about that in the things that we choose, but there have been, I think, several experiments about things you might want to check out from the library. The Seed Library, which is active in many locations, is really, really cool.
Yeah, we have binoculars, we have telescopes, and we have oral history backpacks where you can record oral histories.
Wow.
So that's what we've got so far, but we're expanding that as well.
That's good. No, thank you for sharing that. And then the last question, I believe one of you mentioned that in the Hyde Park Library, there's the new service you're providing for technological services in Haitian Creole.
It's a program that we are in partnership with our digital equity partners in the city. So they're doing Haitian Creole one-on-one tech support every week.
That's awesome. Is that only at the Hyde Park branch?
Right now it is. We are in partnership with our other library departments looking to expand computer access classes in other languages, and so we're working on that as well.
I would love to advocate for the next branch to provide that to be the Mattapan Branch Library. I think that would that location makes a lot of sense for it to be the next one. But that is really it for me. Want to ask my colleagues, do you have more questions for this group of panelists before we move on to our second? Okay, so this, Councilor Murphy, then we'll go in order.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for all of your answers, and to my colleagues for asking good questions. One just quick thing, Councilor Fitzgerald's brought up, the proximity of the Kenny and Adam Street, and there's others around, but as a former BPS teacher, I often would drive to the Copley Library during seasons, to get a lot of books. Is there a partnership already, or a partnership we could grow with our teachers directly, not just with schools? But because I know way back when, I'd be getting the fines, and I'm like, I'm just going to pay the fines because the kids are reading them, right? And I taught kindergarten for many years, so all of the themes that would come up in our curriculum, it would be great, and such a great resource to bring, a bag of books to the classroom, and they loved them. So I always thought it was wonderful to see the kids actually reading the books. But if there's some way to partner with teachers that way.
Yeah, as David has mentioned, we're in a position where we really want to expand our partnership with the Boston Public Schools, but we have a long standing, very successful partnership, and the most successful partnerships we have tend to be in the individual branches of the individual children's librarians and the teachers in the areas around them. That includes the central library, but also all the branches. That's where they can have the most impact, and that's where I think we see the most interaction is on that level between the librarian and the teacher directly.
That's great. I would just say I'd love to uplift that in any way we can help to do that. And that ties into, you mentioned Aid Strong and the digital. It seems, because in all of our opening remarks, we talked about how the libraries touch every part of everyone's life, that I guess the easier question would be, which departments do you not partner with, right? Because there's so many. And oftentimes when you're a department that is, many departments lean on you too, right? You lean on them for resources, but is that something that you are able to quantify, right? To make sure when it comes to budget season, right, that you're getting enough support, because you'd never say no to the other departments, but to make sure that when they're asking for things, even the teachers who want your books, because we do have a big school budget, but it's those individual relationships you're saying with libraries, and just wondering if that's...
Yeah, I think that's a very good suggestion. I mean, our default is always to try and say yes if we possibly can. Under the Wu administration, the library is now part of the Human Services Cabinet, and so that just heightens our responsibility to be in partnership with Aid Strong, BCYF, Office of Returning Citizens, Office of Youth Engagement and Advancement, and Veterans Affairs. And so we have to take our responsibilities to have a special relationship to uplift our fellow cabinet departments. But yes, I think you'd be hard-pressed to name a city department that
right.
we do not have done something with.
No, that's good, but if there's ever times where you do feel like you have to say no, or you can't provide enough, I think it's a smart thing to come to us, right, or those departments, to find different ways to get support, knowing that the best way sometimes is through the library, because people do trust your branches and your institutions to come to, so to strengthen those relationships, but fiscally responsible, making sure that you have what you need is important. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two brief, quick questions to David. David, can you talk about, even though the permanent library in Chinatown will be built shortly, it'll take a period of time, what outreach are we doing in the meantime for Cantonese-speaking residents? Many of them, as you know, most of them really, don't speak English. And then my second question is, can you tell me any unique programs that you might be thinking about in terms of bringing more veterans into libraries across the city?
So for our We have a fantastic staff at Chinatown, as you know. We work with the Friends as well, and before at the end of the school year last year, we had a little, not a little, but a meeting to talk to the neighborhood about the project, and we will be doing more outreach as we move forward. We're very fortunate to have Cantonese speakers on staff, so we're able to expand into the neighborhood.
And that pertains to collection selection as well.
Yes, of course.
With respect to the Veterans Affairs, we're in early stages of conversations with Commissioner Santiago and his team about what would make most sense. There have been clearly one-off opportunities when they come up to engage, and that community is a treasured part of our city of Boston. And so to go that extra mile to find out what would be something special to do, we intend to do that.
David, and thank you to Priscilla. I just want to say thank you. Also, I just wanted to mention the librarians at the Chinatown temporary branch are excellent, and their language of speaking Cantonese and English is exceptional. And so just want to acknowledge their professionalism and their dedication to their job. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Fitzgerald?
No further questions. Thank you guys for all you do. Look forward to even the greater work that you have ahead in the future.
Thank you. Counselor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just questions about outreach and collaborations with community partners. I don't know if this has been asked already, but don't remember that being asked. Okay. How do you do that? Cultural competency training, collaborations with community, reaching out to public housing as well as veterans. I get that you're in that, in the process of that.
Would you like to start?
Sure, I can start. We do an extensive amount of partnering. We partner with organizations all across the city, nonprofits, cultural organizations, service organizations. I think
Is all part of your programmatic report, like you're going to be sending in?
a lot of it will be. We have a director of strategic partnerships. Our outreach team, most of the work we are able to do is because of the partnerships we have. We just met, this week has been meeting with 3 or 4 different partners for potential new programs. A lot of them are programmatic, but again, like in workforce development, for example, we do a lot of partnering with service organizations that can really help us actually do the work, partner with groups that help do taxes for people. We will often partner with organizations if we can't handle the language, a certain language, so we can bring instructors in that do speak a different language and help to work with communities. But yeah, it's something we are always, we really connect a lot of people together.
What about cultural competency?
Yeah, do you want to talk about the workforce? I mean the equity.
Yeah, so we had initially a equity programs coordinator who had expertise in that area, who was working with us, who departed. We're actually posting a new position based upon that experience to really have an expert on staff who can advise, work with colleagues, ensure that when we choose language to promote a program or in our selection of partners, we're doing so in a way that is respectful and engaging. And so we look forward to this phase 2 of activity. Many of our staff goes through a variety of training programs, including in this particular area, and in communities where our staff have lived and worked in that community for a long time. They know their community well, and we want to replicate that kind of experience. We have hired a lot of new people over the last 3 years since coming out of COVID, and we want to make sure they have the experience of being able to engage with their communities effectively and respectfully. And so this is something that's front and center for us.
I see. Thank you so much. What about fine-free policies, any of that?
We are fine-free. We have
Okay.
been for several years. We started with youth and then moved to adults. And as you would expect or would hope, circulation actually went up as a result. So it brought about exactly the right desired effect by removing a barrier. If you lose a book entirely, you still have to maybe take care of that. But certainly, if you're late, we're not in the business of charging people for being late.
Thank you. It's been a long time for me. I only purchase books now, so thank you. What about mobile libraries? Have we considered this?
Michael, I think, referenced our e-bike program. I'm not sure if, Councillor, you were here during that question, but we don't have a mobile bus scenario anymore, but the e-bike, which was called Bibliocycle and is now going to be called
BPL by bike.
BPL by bike. So these are bikes with carts on the back that travel to farmers markets or pop-up spaces or closed branches, and the library staff will be there and sign up people with cards. They're Wi-Fi enabled, so it's like a little mini branch on a bike.
Oh, like the Obama phone thing that we see at Stop and Shop, right?
I'm sorry?
Like the Obama phone stations. They're like free, they're not Obama phones. They're free phones that came during his administration that people would sign up if they were income eligible.
Free to all.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Just to surmise, like sort of what we've talked about here today, the report, look forward to that, 40 pages or not, let's get through it. I really want to understand what all the wonderful work that you're doing. Really appreciate how candid you are and thorough you are in listening and being receptive. The budget, looking forward to that facility conversation. That's a hard, like you see every single counselor saying, give us the third floor. So that's a hard ask. That's a real ask. Looking forward to pragmatic conversations about budget and can we afford it, where are we going with this, and what is it for, and in whatever way that I can continue to advocate. Last but not least, of course, looking forward to that process for library name change. I don't necessarily, again, can't give you a hard position on whether or not it's the Nubian Square Library or it's the Sarah Ann Shaw. Like there's other things coming up now, but let's. I look forward to continuing that with you as well. Thank you all for your work.
I just also want to say thank you for your advocacy, for being panelists today, for the work that you all do for the Boston Public Library. I look forward to continuing this partnership to make sure that not just the 3 libraries in my district, but all libraries across the city get the resources they need. I would like to give you the opportunity to give any final remarks, if you have any.
I would just like to thank you for the opportunity to come talk outside of budget about all of the great work that is happening right across the system, about the needs of our community and projects and work that were well underway. And so thank you to Councillor Murphy for sponsoring this hearing and you for convening the hearing under this committee.
Of course, it was my pleasure.
Thank you for being here. It's great for you to come into City Hall. Many departments are right here, so we see them more often when we're in the hallways and on the elevators. But I appreciate, your advocacy. You have a great job, right? Working with the libraries is a wonderful thing, and as you already knew, but this was a well-attended council hearing because our constituents care, right? Our colleagues care, but obviously, we hear a lot about the need and the services you provide are quality of life issues that matter and just make the residents' life in the city of Boston better. So thank you for all you do. And I know I'm looking forward to the next panel. The Friends of the Library, I would say almost all maybe have a Friends group, right? We have the South End here today to speak. And one thing I'm looking forward to that conversation is, they will bring up some of the challenges, right? Which is an important thing to talk about also. And I think there will be a good balance to this conversation. And we'll then, when we're here about the budget, like you said, we're here before the budget, so we won't have to focus on the questions we talked about today. We can really get down to those numbers, which are important going into the budget season. So thank you for being here. Thank you.
Yes.
Will the library panelists remain so that they can listen to our next panelist?
I can make the request. Will you be able to stay to listen to the second panel?
Yeah, some of us can stay, certainly, if you prefer.
Thank you.
But with that, I'll dismiss this panel And then I'll call up Yvette and Marlene. I believe Yvette is virtual. Is Marlene here? Oh, please have a seat.
Hear me? This is Yvette Jarrow.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you for joining.
That's great.
We have Marlene here in person.
I would defer to Marlene as a start off, and then I'll follow up with it after that. Is that okay?
That sounds great. Well,
Okay, thank you.
the
Thank
floor
you
is
so
yours,
much.
Marlene.
Thank you so much. As I was sitting here, not the first time I've been here, for the last 15 years advocating for the South End Library, I was thinking how wonderful an experience this is. Here we are with councillors like Ed Flynn advocating for a third floor in the library, Councillor Durgan advocating for the Fenway Library, Councillor Fernandez Anderson asking for equity in operational expenditure so that the libraries can stay open, and Councillor Fitzgerald, who I've never met but heard a lot of good things about, advocating for his library. So, and my question is, why can't we have these meetings in the neighborhoods once a year with Boston Public Library, the executive team that was here, as well as some of, or if not all, of the Boston Public Library trustees. The reason why we are here and why these councillors are advocating for us is that we have been advocating to them for the library. It is a lot of work. We are volunteers. It so happens in the South End, it's a very activist community. We can push and fight for what we feel we deserve and what the neighborhood needs, but it is a very hard job. And when you talk about equity, it is communities like the South End who can, after a lot of work, achieve their goals. Many other communities do not. And so first of all, I want to thank you for having this meeting about libraries outside of the budget hearing, because usually the budget hearings are the only time when advocates can request, criticize, laud the people who have influence over the budget. But it is also the time when most of the decisions about how the budget will be allocated has been made by the Boston Public Library. So it is very hard for individuals who are not elected officials or appointed officials to reach the Boston Public Library's team. Many phone calls, many emails. I have emails from 2 years ago that were never responded, and I have a good relationship with people at the BPL. It is just really hard. So what I really appreciate your expanding this to this moment. And the other actors in the BPL are the Boston Public Library trustees. We have a 15-member board of trustees. They are appointed by the mayor of Boston, and at the moment it's a group of people that have been appointed by the last two mayors and the current mayor. Those trustees are basically inaccessible to the general public. There are 4 quarterly meetings a year, at the end of which people who are volunteers like myself, we have 2 minutes to make a case for whatever it is we would like to see in the library. They don't have to respond, and they often don't respond. There is no contact information for them. and there's no phone number, they cannot be engaged. And yet they make enormous decisions, including the selection of the Boston Public Library president. So, in other words, people like myself have very little access to both the executive team and the Boston Public Library trustees. And matters that concern hours of opening hours, the kind of collections, the staffing, programming, access to the community space, which is so important in libraries and in communities, and is in fact the second most important item in the Boston Library Public Capital Plan. It's a community gathering place. So the thing is, how about extending this kind of an event to a regular event in the community where regular people who are not elected can ask the kind of questions that you have asked of the Boston Public Library team. I was also thinking about the question of new libraries, as was brought up by Councillor Durkin. The Boston Public Library is almost entirely funded by municipal money. The private contribution is really small percentage-wise. This is not the case in other library systems. In other library systems, the trustees are active and prolific fundraisers. And I recall about 10, 15 years ago when I was doing a lot of research on libraries, and I found myself in St. Paul, Minnesota, where the city wanted to build a new library, and it was going to cost $14 million, and the city did not have the money. So the foundation of their library and their trustees made a commitment to raise $7 million. And the city then contributed another $7 million. And this is how that library was built. This is what I would like to see happen in the Boston Public Library system here. I would like to see trustees be appointed and asked to be prolific fundraisers so that the entire task of funding does not fall on the municipal budget. So I think I'm going to stop right here.
Thank you. Yvette, can you hear us?
I can. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'll introduce myself. I'm Yvette Jarrow, and I'm the current president of the Friends of the South End Library. And I want to thank you all, councilors, for this hearing. It has been good to hear the questions and the answers. And so I have a few comments to make. And as mentioned earlier, some of them are positive and some of them are not as positive. So as you've heard already, since about October 2019, the South End branch has been closed, which is about 44 months out of the last 4 years. And I would have to say that I was quite disappointed by how slow it took, how long it took to evaluate the library after the catastrophic flood that closed it in April of 22, and we have remained closed since. It took at least 7 to 8 months to evaluate the branch condition, and during that time we found it very difficult to get information on what was happening and when there would be some communications about that. We were constantly being asked by residents in the community, and we didn't have any information. We were, however, delighted when we were able to participate in the conversations that ultimately ended in the decision to develop a new branch rather than repair the existing building. We had been waiting several years for the start of a programming study for a new library, so it was very welcome that this process was able to start finally this year. And as you've heard, we've had a couple of really good community meetings. The goals for the upcoming third community meeting were articulated as finalizing the branch building program, updating test fits with regard to the new construction possibilities or options, and presenting a recommendation for a preferred option for the start of the design process. We have a concern about this, which has been articulated by Councillor Flynn and perhaps other councillors today, and we're grateful for their advocacy. I'll come back to the issue of, I'll come back to a final request at the end of this few moments that I have to address you. I would like to talk about the issue of temporary services, which has come up in regards to other branches, so I think it's really relevant. And I believe that the BPL should establish a more transparent and communicate that the elements of temporary closure process that provides as much service to the community as possible. During our extended closure, which was unexpected, we have our temporary library services have ranged from nothing to minimal, and we suspect that that will continue for at least a couple more years as we get a new building. And we had found it very difficult to engage with BPL in terms of adequate temporary services, even for such extenuating circumstances as we have experienced. Only recently has Christina Jones, our new librarian, as of May last year, been able to offer several services like Children's Story Hour, English as a Second Language, a book club, the shuttle that was mentioned earlier, and several pop-up book giveaways in the library park. We are grateful for these services, and we hear this from the community as well. And we are missing some very important services, specifically book pickup and drop-off. So we are glad to hear about the possibility of e-bikes with, what was it, BPL by bike, I guess, is what President Leonard called it. We're excited about that, so it's good to hear. I'd like to talk for a moment about staff and make a distinction that maybe isn't as obvious to everyone, but the library staff in a branch provides a warm and welcoming experience on a day-to-day basis, and there's almost nowhere in the neighborhood for that other than the library. And this gets to the whole point about community and connection with people who use the library and love it. The librarians and the staff that are there are passionate about the books, about reading, about learning, and they use this expertise to meet patrons' needs for books and research and connection. And this is a key difference to the experience of the Central Library. Branch library staff get to know neighborhood residents, they listen to their needs, and they often find creative ways to meet those needs where people are. And library branch users are often delighted by staff who have fresh ideas and resources set aside for them. It is a place where people go and they can become connected to the staff, to other residents, and that makes a significant difference to all who use a branch. And I could go on about the connections and the elements of that, but I feel like it's an important distinction about a branch library that we should all keep in mind. And then I want to return back for a moment to the building and the building process before I finish. And I'm going to start with a request, which is that Friends of the South End Library and other members of the community have identified several building program elements that have not yet been included in the building program as it was presented to us in the second community meeting. We request that before reaching a decision about the preferred option that would go into design, we are asking for a commitment to share with us the programming study and test fit that features a 3-story building instead of a 2-story building. And we want that to accommodate specific community needs that have been articulated already, but I will quickly run through. A dedicated senior space for a variety of activities and connecting with people. A dedicated Latino-Latina space featuring collections, computers, and relevant resources for that community that is adjacent to our building. A fully functional kitchen to offer culinary and nutritional workshops as well as support our very food-oriented neighborhood with refreshments. A space for patrons to store their belongings, including strollers, but also other types of belongings that they have when they're using the library. And we would like that the building not encroach on the alley between the South End Library and those people that live nearby, because it is a fire lane and it already is difficult for homeowners to get into that alley from that, or to get into their back alley from that side alley. So the request is that there is a commitment to sharing this type of analysis about these requests before we reach a design concept and move into the design phase. So thank you for your attention, and we're asking for a respectful consideration of our request. That's it.
Thank you so much for that. What I'll do now is I'll allow my colleagues to ask questions to the panel, starting with Councilor Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. You touched on, Marlene, the point I made, that it reminds me of the school committee. Right? We know they're there. Most people don't even know how many or what all their names are, but they're there somewhere and they do make important decisions. And so how do we connect more for us on the council, but also friends of library groups and just the public? And I think that's a bigger conversation we need to continue. And I do think from the first panel that we're open to talk about that, like how do we get those decision makers at the table? And I'm grateful that both of you from the South End Library are here, and I can picture maybe sometime this summer we have a Friends of the Library meeting that isn't formal here in the council chamber, but maybe out in the community somewhere, and we can invite library staff and to just come and hear, because I'm learning a lot just from the one branch. There's so many across the city, and you touched, which I do appreciate, on the specific needs and knowing that you're here, so you have communities that are surrounding you. And I know when we spoke on the phone, you talked about the need for more of Spanish books and Latino, just cultural need for your brand. So thank you for uplifting that. And just one question that, and I know every group is different, and in your case, you're dealing with a closed library, so you have other issues. but you've been advocating and being such strong volunteers for a long time. If you could just summarize what your group, maybe even pre-closure of your building, like what you focused on and what you uplifted for your branch would be helpful for me to know.
So I became involved with the South End Library because I was essentially a park advocate. I helped renovate Titus Sparrow Park, and afterwards someone in my neighborhood asked me, how about you look at Library Park, which was a needle park, and I began to work on that, but I also realized very quickly that I also had to look at the library itself, because the problems prevalent in the park were also prevalent in the library. And I began to advocate for a library renovation at that time. I walked into the library and it was basically a homeless shelter. There were about a dozen men sleeping very peacefully in the one sunlit room that was the downstairs. And it was great, you know, but on the other hand, it made a lot of other users uncomfortable. It is not a homeless shelter, it is a library. And so my efforts to renovate began then, and shortly thereafter, I began to attend trustees meetings and found out that there were plans to close up to a third of the branches of the Boston Public Library system. And that's when there was an enormous action. I called the Boston Globe. They came to that meeting where that vote was going to be held. And I realized that once the Boston Globe and other media were involved, there was no way libraries were going to be closed without people knowing about it. So after that fight was over, and I think thanks to the Boston delegation, who told Mayor Menino that no money would be forthcoming from the state if any branch would be closed. After that, I began to focus on, and I'm talking about me, but it wasn't just me. There was a whole group of neighbors. We began to focus on creating political power for the library. And we did that through programming. We started an author series, we started art exhibits, exhibits in the windows, we had a newsletter, and basically built an enormous constituency for the South End Library. And this is how we got here.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for your advocacy. And
You're welcome.
For now, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to say thank you to Marlene and Yvette for their testimony. I also want to acknowledge the senior staff of the public library for staying, and I want to thank them for staying and listening to the concerns. So I appreciate that. It shows respect, in my opinion. Maybe for Marlene or for Yvette, this library, and I know David also supports this, but this library is important for the Latino community, and they deserve a state-of-the-art library. And I think it's critical that we work together to provide this library to the residents of the South End. But for those people that are listening, Marlene or Yvette, why is it important for us to ensure that this is a library that has specific services for the Latino community? I think it should have specific services to the Latino community, and I'll advocate for that 100%. But for the listening audience, why is that important?
It is would you like, you want me to?
Yeah, that would be great, Marlene.
Oh, okay. So the Latino community is about 15% of the South End, which has like 38,000 residents. And It is their library. They have no other library anywhere. They count on this library for their books, for their programs. And over the years, several times, in fact, when Yvette came on the board and began to learn about taking over as president from me, I took her at least once to neighborhood meetings at Villa Victoria and introduced them to the various programs that existed in the library. But the reality was there's no signage in Spanish, and the collection for books for children or adults is very poor. There's no Latino programming. So I think they were aware of it, and even more so than before we visited. But the fundamental problem is that a number of residents there do not speak English, and so it's hard for them to navigate a library that has no signage even in Spanish, or programming or books that show, titles. I remember that we actually had a very nice children's librarian, Margaret Gardner, who made wonderful displays in the big windows that give on Tremont Street of the new books for kids that came in. And I remember seeing a Latina mother with her child, and they were looking, I think, for, books that sort of were for them, but they were all in English. And so these kind of things matter. Libraries are a tremendous resource for everyone and they should be for the Latino community, Latina community as well.
Thank you, Marlene. I agree. You said it perfectly.
And I would just like to add that that population of our community is because of what Marlene just described, is is very underserved, and we would like to attract patrons from that part of our community, as well as other patrons who are Asian, that Councilor Flynn, you've mentioned previously. It's an opportunity to expand the value of the branch library to communities that we have yet to reach. So, thank you.
Thank you, Yvette, and both of you said it perfectly, and you are exactly right. The South End has a large Asian community, and actually in Villa Victoria, I think Villa Victoria is about 25%, maybe higher, population Asian. And right next to Villa Victoria on West Dedham Street is the BHA development. And a large percentage of that, I would say over 60 or 70% of the residents living at West Dedham Street, BHA, next to Villa Victoria, are Asian residents. And there are other pockets of the Asian community in and around that area. So I want to acknowledge the welcoming attitude of the residents of the South End and the more work that we have to do with this new library and temporary library to be as welcoming as we possibly can. And I have no further questions other than to say I used to have office hours at the South End Library once a month, and that the first room, I used to call it the sunroom, right in the little passageway, and in the wintertime would be very cold out, but in that room it would be very warm out because the sun would be coming in at you. And I used to love sitting there for a couple of hours talking to the residents as they come in. And I told them I was the security guard at the South End Library. But anyway, I just want to say thank you to Marlene, to Yvette, and to the senior staff at the Boston Public Library. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Marlene, Yvette, thank you so much for coming and for advocating for the South End community as well. Well, it's not technically in District 3. I have had South End folks come up to me and also obviously advocate for this third floor, and I do support them in that. However, I just want to try and be mindful, too, of the the cost and the operational cost and the physical cost that the city has to take on to add that third floor and the reality of if that can happen or not, right? So we'll go to bat to see if we can make it happen. But I understand the operational hurdles that Mr. Leonard faces, as well as the physical cost. So I don't know the answer. I was throwing this out there, and the architecture and building is not my, it's not what I went to school for, but I would hope there could be some way in this rebuilding of the South End Library where perhaps it can be made where an additional third floor could be added easier in the future. I know there's some sort of architectural feat of engineering, I'm sure we could discuss, where maybe if we don't get it this time around, it's not our missed chance. There's another bite at the apple wherein if we get that chance for a third floor later down the line with other funds, that it could be added as easier than saying, oh, now we have to, recreate a whole new building and how do we add one floor? If it can be designed with that in mind, I think it opens up the door more for a third floor to be more likely if we are not successful this time around. Just something I thought I'd mention, is something maybe perhaps, President, you could look at. No need to respond. But I think it's just one of the thoughts I had as people approached me about this. But until then, I know the benefit that libraries have on all communities, and every library deserves the best one that they should get. And so we're here to make sure the South End gets the best of theirs too. So thank you for coming, but no further questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you. Could I respond?
Yes.
Thank you. So the South End Library that exists at the moment was built, actually opened in 1971, and at the time it was 9,000 square feet. 10 years later, an elevator was added, and because of the rules and regulations of egress and ingress, a chunk of additional programming footage was taken out of the library, and we basically ended up for 50 years with a library that is 7,000 square feet. So the South End has a population of 38,000 plus people. So there are standards for sizes of libraries, and in general, a population of 25,000 residents generally is entitled to a library of 20,000 square feet. And that is the case too in many libraries in the city of Boston. And the square footage is not necessarily in one library, because the South End is a very densely populated area, but Brighton is, there's much more room. So, for example, so the Mattapan Library, which serves a population of 36,000 people, is 21,000 square feet. The Jamaica Plain libraries, there are two libraries that together have more than 22,000 square feet of library space for a population of 37,000. Brighton has two libraries with a combined 34,000 square feet in two libraries. Hyde Park, one neighborhood, serves 35,000 people, and it is 23,000 square feet. So the three libraries in Roxbury combined serve more than 60,000 residents, but there are three libraries that total 50,000 square feet. And off the top of my head, I remember in Dorchester, there's a population of 101,000, and they have six libraries that total something like 80,000 square foot of library space. So there are, we fit in there. And I also want to point out that for 5 years, the South End, it's 38,000 people, have 0 square footage in library access. So I think we deserve a library to meet the needs of the community.
Marlene, I will say that the best part of this job is the education that you get from your colleagues and the people that you get to talk to. And those are some fantastic stats, and they really do tell a story. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm now more knowledgeable of it. So I'm glad I asked the question, and I'm glad you responded.
Thank you so much for asking the question. This is what we count on our counselors for.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marlene, I just wanted to appreciate you and thank you so much, you and Yvette, for being here, but all the work. And as you mentioned, voluntarily giving your time, your passion, your heart into this, it's a lot of hard work. I know this because just to keep up as a counselor with all of the efforts, with all of the meetings, and not talking about, with excluding home time and all of the stressors that is added with those efforts. So I appreciate you and support the library having its space. Just a minor correction, Roxbury has one library. And I think that, yes, Eggleston Square has one, Mission Hill has one, Roxbury has one.
I see. This comes out of the Wikipedia information as Roxbury having 3 libraries.
Oh, wow.
And so that's how I apportioned it.
We want it all to be Roxbury.
Oh, okay. Well,
including the South End, which used to be Roxbury. But that's
maybe
another
still
conversation.
is. It's on my I get mail to my Roxbury address.
If it was all one Roxbury, right? One town, we would have so many, I think, more collisions. However, I support it, and I think that, you know, in the conversation, I'm interested in a conversation about budget and affordability. I agree with you. When you put something off, like, get it where you can get it. Because when you put something off, I don't see us like years later, with all due respect, and I appreciate my colleague for acknowledging the educational piece. But when you put something off, who knows? It's not guaranteed, and years, decades before the change can come. Now is the time. It's overdue. South End desperately needs a library. South End makes a really good use when it is open of the tiny little space that we had there. And as I said, my freshman year, I attended Snowden High School, so I am very familiar and frequented in that library, in the parks, in that area. And so I think that it's a matter of going to the next conversation, us support, and us as your representative, also going to my colleagues and getting you have all of your delegates to represent you. You have 4 at-large counselors. Here, there's 1. Councilor Mejia was here. And then you have all of the abutting districts, right? Councilor Flynn and I share it. Councilor Fitzgerald is an abutting district, supporting it in terms of what's reasonable in conversations about the 3rd floor. But beyond that, the programmatic expenditure and ensuring that we have all that we need in the library. I don't have the questions because I receive your emails and I read them thoroughly, I answer my own, and then I send my representative from my office if I'm not able to attend your meetings, and there's been lots of them, and I've been keeping up. It makes total sense. There is nothing else that I can say. On record, I am saying that officially, it doesn't make sense if we don't get that 3rd floor. It doesn't make sense that we have to wait so long. I think that the library has done, Mr. David does an excellent job in his leadership, and he is a very forthcoming person, very transparent, and now we have to support him in working with our mayor, administration, and everyone else involved for us to get this money and make it happen. It's really simple. It should be, and we're gonna fight. We're gonna continue to advocate for you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it on behalf of the community and the Friends of the South End Library and my excellent partner and successor, Yvette Jarreau.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess what I'll say is that as a District 5 counselor, I have no jurisdiction over the South End Library.
Your
but
vote counts as much as mine.
I did go to the Hurley School on Worcester Street for K through 8, and that's where I learned how to use a computer. At the South End Library. So, and I'm also very fond of the Villa Victoria community that Councilor Flynn mentions, which is the heart of the Puerto Rican community in Boston. So whenever the conversation starts about what's going into the South End Library, I think it would be beautiful to honor that community at that library, to make them feel welcomed, because it is a very short walking distance from Villa Victoria to the South End Library.
Across the street?
Across the street. And I think that access is very important to honor the culture and the diversity of our city.
Absolutely.
Again, District 5 counselor, but I love that library.
Thank you.
So wanting to just elevate that. Yes.
Rebuttal on your comment, District 5 counselor, but you would support a resolution to encourage the mayor to get this library a third floor.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
We got him on it.
Yes. But that's it for me. Do any of my colleagues have any follow-up questions for this panel?
Just thank you for being here, and no, I was going to say hope, but no, this is the beginning of a stronger relationship with me and your community at the library, and thank you for advocating and coming today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Councillor Flynn, as well.
And I would like to say it was Councillor Flynn when I asked him if he had ideas of who I should invite, so I do want to say Councillor Flynn did mention both of you and Stephen Fox, who had then connected us. So thank you. The South End community, you know, you have a history of being strong advocates, so thank you, and uplifting not just your community, but the whole city.
Yes,
I appreciate all that you
absolutely.
do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you to Molly and Yvette. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To the panelists, you may feel free to go or listen to the public testimonies. I believe we have 2 public testimonies virtually.
Okay.
So we will now move forward with public testimony. When your name is called, please come down to one of the 2 podiums or virtually. State your name, your neighborhood, and the organization or affiliation. Please make sure you speak into your microphone and keep your comments to 2 minutes. The first name that I see on here is Rudney Celestine.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and I hope you can see me. Hi, everyone. My name is Whitney Celestin. I'm a Dorchester resident, at least as of now, and I'm happy to be here to testify today. And we all shared our branches. I have to shout out my Common Square Library. I went to Dorchester High School. That was my babysitting library. And then the Adams branch was my weekend branch, where I held my baby's brother's hand, and we used to go to the library on the weekends. And now he's a computer engineer. So I thank BPL for that, because it exposed us as new immigrant kids to computer use. So I have some points here, and I know I only have 2 minutes, so I have to run through this. And so I do want to thank the council, Chair Pippen, for holding this hearing. And I'm going to use my 2 minutes here for 3 questions that I will follow with comments after the questions. And so I also want to do, before I use my 2 minutes, I want to have a response to 2 of the comments that were made, because I'm also the former and inaugural equity officer for the Boston Public Library. Of the people who are present here, Yvette has been to my office. We've sat down and talked about some of my initiatives that I was working on. And so the Peer Navigator program was mentioned earlier by the Director of Library Services. And this program was funded over a year ago, before the social workers started. And so I do hope BPL commits to peer navigators, because I understand, I was told that there is, real time and there is library time, but I believe that real life doesn't wait. And so we do have to be proactive in what we do at the library. And so friends groups are also crucial for engagement and advocacy. And I want to thank the South End Friends, but in my realm, I've experienced the Mattapan Friends, experiencing some difficulties and doing basic things as little as drafting their memorandum to understand how they will function as a friends group for the library. More money for staffing, sure, but maybe they need more capacity, but how do we then stay on track in terms of accountability, right? So we're doing the things that we're saying that we will do. So now my 2 minutes. Question number 1, and I wish the president were here, but he's not. Are you truly, is the BPL truly, and is there a better way for BPL to show us a commitment to equity? Because there was a racial equity plan released by the president of the library, and I was privileged to serve as the inaugural equity officer. But I do want to bring our attention to the leadership of the library. Whereas the Board of Trustees is very diverse, it's getting more and more diverse, but I do want to bring your attention to the leadership team within the library. Only 2 of 12 people are of color, and I believe one of them being of mixed race, which doesn't mean too much in terms of context. However, we do want the library to reflect the people that it serves. There's not a single Black person on the leadership team at the library, and I brought that up when I onboarded, and so here we are, it's still the same. And so in terms of equity, there was a lot of discussion about money and there was a lot of discussion about buildings, but we also want to think about the programming. So as a budget, I received $5,000 first fiscal year for an equity program, a new program, and I wish I had more say in getting that budget. However, it was very public when the Community History Initiative got $500,000 as a grant. And it's been nearly a year now. I remember because that same day I went to the flag raising in May 2023, and they were having a session at the library, at the Central Library. So it's been about a year, and this program is helping us put recorders and backpacks. Amazing program, but I would love to see a little bit more done around that, given the sum of money for this program. And so I also want to add that, coincidentally, I signed my own resignation letter the same day President Claudine Gay was inaugurated at Harvard. But I do want to say that her own resignation and my own doesn't mean that EDI does not matter, because EDI does matter. And I will show you why in the second question that I have. Who now is focusing on, let me take a deep breath. I'm trying to run through this. Excuse me, Chair. Who now is focusing on the Video Remote Interpretation Initiative? I launched that initiative in 175 years of the library's existence. There was no way to communicate, again, accessibility, to communicate with those who speak sign language. I launched a program in partnership with the Language and Communication Access, the Disabilities Commission, Immigrant Advancement, and I upcycled devices where I didn't have money to bring these programs into the library. I got creative, upcycled devices from the long-term lending program, and I was able to launch a system-wide program within months where it offers now sign language, as well as 138 plus languages, as well as video and audio, to make it easier for staff to communicate. And I do want to remind us that we're going through a migrant crisis in Massachusetts, so it is ever more important for us to have these resources available. And I also made sure that the workforce development team, the career counselor, as well as a social service person, were each assigned a computer, so that way, when they're having these sessions, these services are even more accessible. And my last question that I'm going to focus on, I'm saddened to hear that there are school libraries that are not getting as much as they need. Yes, we're thinking about neighborhood libraries, but the school libraries. I myself, after I left Dorchester High for freshman year, I went to Brighton High School. My librarian was an angel in my life, like I've said many times before, who kept bringing me back every single week, and we built a relationship. At that same library, I don't know if it's connected, but I received an honor roll award in that library, and for me, that's a core memory that I love to hold on to know that books, libraries, and education got me here. So to end, I will add my question. The library hired a Metro Boston Library Network administrator right before I left. And if I left the library end of September, if you do a quick count, it's over 6 months now. And that person reports to the Director of Strategic Partnerships. My question is, and that's my final question that I will end with, what is the progress that this area of the library is making? Because if you go on the website, the MBLN website, mbln.org, Metro Boston Library Network includes Malden, the school libraries, and you'll see all of them listed there. But I've said over and over again that we need to have more in terms of what we do in partnerships with other cities, right? Between the schools, yes, everything is going digital, but we have the resources to uplift our digital services, right? So, yeah.
Just making sure you're wrapping up.
So I am wrapping up. So that's my last question. What is the progress on the MBLN network? And thank you for this opportunity to testify. Thank you, Chair.
No, of course. What I'll do is that I'll ask central staff to take those questions and put it into the record, so that somebody can send you a response, and we'll make sure that we have your email on file.
Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you. The last public testimony that we have on is Sam Pierce. Sam, can you hear us? Oh, okay. Yeah. Sam, you may need to accept to be promoted as a panelist to be able to testify. Okay, it looks like we've lost Sam. But seeing no further public testimonies, I do just want to thank the panelists for being here today, both the staff of the BPL and also the Friends of the South End Library. Thank you so much. I want to thank Councilor Murphy for being the lead sponsor of this hearing order, and to my colleagues who were here and asked such great questions. I'm pretty sure this is not the last time that we will be chatting. Looking forward to continuing this conversation and just making sure that libraries across the city continue to be prioritizing and getting the resources that they deserve. But with that, this hearing on docket number 0513 is adjourned.